Tell us a bit about yourself and SGInnovate.
Okay. Well, as you know, it's very interesting. We're all on this panel today because my predecessor is the MC of today's session. And I owe a lot. I've inherited a beautiful organization, and that's many thanks to Steve for that. But SGInnovate, Steve's created this in 2016. And you're right, it's owned by the government. Its mission is to catalyze the deep tech sector. And it does that with a trident of approaches. There is, on the one hand, a community platform. So this community platform is the one that engages and mobilizes people who are related to the deep tech sector, whether you're an academic, you're a student, you're from industry, looking to to go into innovation. So that's the community platform. Through the community platform, we get a sense of who's involved. And for those who are interested, we have a talent platform. And the talent platform provides training programs as well as placement services, so to speak. Yeah, it was originally designed to help our own portfolio companies. But what we've done in response to the pandemic is to open this up to see, how this huge database of about 50,000 individuals, 3,000 PhDs, how they might be useful to other players in the economy. And then the third part of SGInnovate is the venture building, venture investment arm. Okay, and there's a classical venture arm that we have a fund with a number of funds totaling just under $100 million, Singapore dollars. But there's also a venture building capacity, under which I would also include something that Steve did, which has turned out to really, really well. What Steve had done was he had brought in a group called Entrepreneur First. This was based in the UK, and they have a very, very original take on how to build deep tech startups, focused not so much on the project, but on the individual talent first, and then building ideas and companies therefrom. So that's a little bit about SGInnovate. As for myself, I'm a rolling stone. I trained in medicine. I specialized in anesthesia. And then almost as soon as I received board certification, I left. I joined what was then the venture capital arm of the Economic Development Board. There was a specific fund called Buy One Capital, huge fund, $1 billion back then in 2000, that was focused just on the biomedical space. And I would argue that a lot of the things that we have today in the biomedical sector would not have been possible had it not been for some of the initial work that was done way back in 2000. So I left medicine, went to EDB, joined this fund. At some point, I was sent to England to start our European office. And again, not by design, I ended up with a portfolio of medical device companies. So when I came back, sort of almost by default, that became my responsibility, taking care of medical device companies. And I soon joined one of them as its CEO. Actually, Howard and I were both in this company. And following that, I moved on to academia, first at the National University of Singapore, where I created a little accelerator funded entirely by philanthropy, and then subsequently to the Nanyang Technological University, where I did technology transfer across the board, across all technology areas, before I found myself at SGInnovate.
No, I remember actually meeting you at NTU. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and I sat on one of your panels. Together with Howard, I was on the biomedical panel. Yeah.
Right. So you joined SGInnovate in May 2020. So it was the height of the pandemic, which you mentioned. So how was it? I mean, how are things different because of that?
Well, obviously, I'm still, 3 months down the road. I still haven't met 70% of my staff in person. I'm now starting to creep into the office from time to time, and I'm running into people that my colleagues. So on the one hand, yes, is that ideal? No. But on the other hand, with the available technology and with a great team, it didn't take long before I felt like I was part of the furniture, quite frankly. So but again, many thanks to Steve, because this was a good team and it was an easy transition.
Good.
Yeah. But of course, for SGInnovate, there were many challenges. Yeah, I mean, we had to quickly. One of the things I wanted SGInnovate to do was to be useful and helpful, and I alluded to that earlier. Certainly, in the current environment, what we're able to do to help people get re-employed, to help fresh graduates get employed, and to help them do something if they are unemployed, whether it's to retrain them, send them on internships. Currently, that's probably that's the focus of our attentions right now.
Okay. So now, next, as you mentioned, SGInnovate has been around now for some 4 years or so.
Yeah.
So, how would you characterize the main achievements after 4 years?
Well, I want to go back to something that Pam said earlier about the role of government in space. I would say that's generally true in frontier technology areas, generally. And, SGInnovate was set up to be a catalyst. So where the private sector has not been able to pick up the slack for whatever reason, whether it's due to, their risk appetite, resources, then government steps in, and that's where we step in. So as a catalyst, I think we were the first investors in our first quantum companies, our first space tech companies, our initial some of the AI companies, analytics companies, EDA companies. So the ability of SGInnovate to lead and to syndicate allows some of the smaller funds, brings in the other funds who traditionally have a different risk appetite.
Yeah.
Numerically, I mean, it breaks the deadlock, because by themselves they will never lead the deals. Yeah. So just numerically, we've invested about 50 million, and that's catalyzed about 650 in private sector investments in total in 4 years. Yeah.
Oh, that's very good. All right. So given that your role is to invest in deep tech, how would you characterize the state of deep tech in Singapore?
Well, and this as almost as well as I do, Dan. I think the important thing is at the ground level, people are energized. I mean, if I just take the example, when I sat on your biomedical panel, we could award 5 projects every year, and these are sort of pre-company projects, right? This is the substrate from which companies are going to emerge, and just from biomed, for every 5 projects that we can award thereabouts, we were getting something like 60, 70 applicants, and that was just the MIT Alliance. When I was at NTU, same thing. When we ran proof of concept grant, commercialization grant funding, we are looking at those at similar numbers. Then if we go one step downstream and see, okay, so after we funded them at a pre-company level, how many companies actually started? And today, I would say between the universities, between the research institutes at A-Star, and then from the creates, including SMART, I would say every year we are starting 50, 60 companies.
Yeah.
Right? So I think over the last 10 years, we have accumulated quite a good few hundred. Of course, many of them have also died. But I would say at steady state right now, we should be 200-300 companies in deep tech areas. And by deep tech, I would define it as anything that's derived from research, protected by IP. Yeah, high entry barrier areas. So at the ground level, the activity levels are high. Yeah. Of course, that's not enough, as you know. You sit in one of the most amazing hotspots in the world. What we do lack, we continue to lack investors who are comfortable investing in the deep tech sector. Yeah. And of course, equally, the other Achilles heel would be talent. And we're talking about people who have been there and done that, right? Been through the cycle of death and rebirth, experience, and have the chops to run startup companies. So these are the things that still need attention.
Actually, that's a good lead into the next question. You mentioned people with the chops, the talents, and so on. Are those the things that Singapore needs in order to, increase the number of startups which get formed and then which exit, well?
I think so. I think it's a combination. I've had the pleasure of working. Well, I'm not going to name names, but some funds from Cambridge, Massachusetts, who are starting to come to Singapore and are starting to invest in companies. And their entire approach, their experience comes through. We don't have enough investors like that. And when they need someone to run a company, they have a ready list of people for the type of company that they're looking at. And that's still something that's I can't say is a strength, honestly. Here, I mean, we haven't had enough people who've gone through this, like I say, the cycle of death and rebirth. People with experience. But without that, I don't think we can even, it's hard to imagine success without a good leadership team.
Right. Okay. So, are there other ecosystems that you think Singapore can learn from that do this better, differently? I mean, are you looking at other ecosystems?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's no secret. I mean, right. I mean, the major metropoles in the global deep tech economy are well known. Cambridge, Massachusetts, Silicon Valley, Tel Aviv, Israel, London, Scandinavia, China, increasingly, right? Just to name a few. And I think the government has studied all of these systems assiduously. But, it's a bit like growing grapes and making wine.
Yes.
We may have acquired all the techniques.
Yes.
Right? What barrels to put them in, how to ferment it. But a lot of it depends on the terroir. You need the right soil, the right temperature, pH has got to be right. And we've got to find our own solution. It's pointless to say, hey, how come, if people in Cambridge can do it in this way, why can't we do it? I think, materially, the substrate's different, the climate's different. I think our size is sometimes a strength, but sometimes also an impediment. Right? There is no escape valve here. I mean, where if one failed, you could fly 3 hours to a different location, and the price of a house is affordable again, and we don't. So the cost-benefit calculus needs to be taken into account.
I understand. Okay, one final question. SGInnovate was an experiment. And with all experiments, some things work and some things don't work. So what do you think has worked and what has not worked?
Well, I think from the standpoint of our role as a catalyst, I think we've done quite well. And very importantly, the fund, which has both a strategic mandate as well as a developmental mandate, to have succeeded catalyzing the sector and have made money. Not simple. Now, where we have fallen short, I mean, maybe it's premature because we don't have a readout. but we could certainly, it would be nice if we had a few more unicorns, so to speak. Right? It would be nice if the investment climate was better, and that's part of our job is to try to raise that. Yeah.
Okay. So lots of good insights, Jui. We're now going to answer some questions, from the audience, and please, send in your questions. So here's one from Tamara Singh. With the aim to support employment, are there particular skills that people should be seeking to build? So I noticed in Singapore there's a push for Python and SQL, but these are already well-established skills in much of Singapore. So what other tech skills should be considered to help people future-proof themselves?
Well, I would say, as a general statement, obviously those are programming languages. That alone is not, that's more and more we're saying this is almost like a third language requirement. Most our kids should all know to code, just like know how to speak Mandarin and English. So it's got to go beyond that. I think, and a lot of it is on-the-job training. So in the deep tech sector, where we're trying to retrain people, a lot of the emphasis really is on immersion and internships, right? So how do you apply your facility in coding to new applications? And I think without any doubt, anything that's related to technology is cybersecurity, AI, application of those capabilities to digital health, to supply chain management. So it's the second order, the derivative of your basic programming skills that need to be honed. I think that would stand you in good stead.
Right. Okay, here's another question. Given how prominent Singapore is as a nation in Southeast Asia, what role do you see SGInnovate playing in fostering deep tech innovation in the region? And this is from Mr. Putuchiri.
Well, I think, this reminds me about some of the questions some of the discussion about Hong Kong. Is it good if Hong Kong prospers? Now that Hong Kong's having, some of its own troubles, is it good for Singapore? I'm not trying to be politically correct, but I think, when the tide rises, everyone, rises with it. So, SGInnovate by itself obviously is not going to be in a position to elevate deep tech innovation in the region, but we do have plans to build vertical communities. We've been very good building a broad community, but as we look into, for instance, medical devices, my close to my heart. We still need an ecosystem of people who can do, blow molding, people who can make nitinol, microfluidics chips, and in order to do that, we're going to have to reach out to the region, because Singapore alone cannot supply all of these capabilities.
Okay. All right. So one final question. As you said, you're a medical practitioner. You were. How do you think Singapore can overcome the current COVID-19 crisis? And are there any SGInnovate startups who can actually help?
Yeah, we've had quite a few companies make, fairly important pivots to address this. Bioformis is one. Bioformis has a deal with, I can't remember if it's Roche and Novartis, but using non-invasive sensors and an analytic platform, they're able to sort of make early predictions on your likelihood of heart failure, for instance. And they're a company that's pivoted, to looking at vital signs that might provide an early indication that, hey, something is not right. Go get yourself checked out. So that's one. We have another portfolio company called Structo, which was in the business of 3D printing dental molds, that has taken a quick detour into making a new generation of nasopharyngeal swabs for better capture and yield. Right? So we've had, these are some examples of companies that have tried to address the challenge. But obviously, it's a tricky question, right? Ultimately, there are investors. This is not what the investors pay them to do. So, there must be alignment
Understand.
across the board. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us today, Jui, and best wishes in moving SGInnovate forward.
Thank you, Dan. It's so good to see you again.
Good to see
Feels
you
like
too.
you never left.
It's certainly hot enough here. It feels like Singapore right now. It's so humid because of the hurricane.
Yeah.
Yeah.